Well, good morning, everyone. Officially, it is that 7:30 hour, and if you've done any of our events, you know that we do like to start on time. So with that, I'd like to formally welcome everyone. For those that don't know me, my name is Sarah Hagee. I'm the Executive Director with the Electrical Association of Philadelphia. Joining me is my colleague, Matt Dybert, this morning, and thank you for being here. Before we jump into today's session, I would like to take a moment on this Veterans Day to thank all those who have served our country, both now and in the past, so thank you. I'd also, of course, like to thank our member and our sponsor, Turtle & Hughes. This session was actually set to take place in person this past spring, but of course, as we all know, COVID had other plans for everyone. So John, I really appreciate you working with us and pivoting into our new environment here. Just a few housekeeping items before we turn this over. Number one, your mics have been muted, but your cameras are on. So normally you don't have that option in these sessions, but if you'd like, if you're camera ready, turn on that camera. I imagine Kathleen would love to see everybody that's here and give her some energy as she's speaking. And so if you would kindly do that, that would be great. In addition, go ahead and keep your mics muted for the time being. Now, when we close the session, or when Kathleen's done, of course, you're welcome to submit questions either via the chat, which we'll monitor towards the end, or if you'd like, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question directly. All right. And again, as I said earlier, our session is being recorded this morning, so just be aware of that. All right. So now I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Kathleen Shanahan, CEO of Turtle & Hughes. An accomplished leader in both government and private sectors, Kathleen joined Turtle in 2017 and was named co-CEO in 2018. And in fact, she is the first non-family CEO in the company in its nearly 100-year-long history. Today, as CEO, Kathleen continues a legacy of leadership held by women at Turtle & Hughes. In fact, earlier this month, Kathleen was recognized as one of 28 CEOs to watch by Family Magazine. So it is my honor and my pleasure today to welcome Kathleen Shanahan. Kathleen.
Thanks, Sarah. You've been great to work with, as have Matt, and we appreciate that so much. And I too want to pay tribute to any of our participants today that have served and been a veteran or knows a veteran. It's a very special day in America to celebrate those heroes to us. So Turtle & Hughes is an electrical distributor. We were founded in New York City, and the corporate headquarters is based in Linden, New Jersey. We've been operating in the Philadelphia market for over 7 years now. And the fourth generation family member is executive chairman of our board, Jane Millard. It's very rare these days to have a fourth generation family member actually actively engaged in the business. And Jane is really our strategic guidepost. She and I were co-CEOs for the last 2 years, and she is very involved in the day in and day out of our business. We're one of the nation's largest independent electrical distributors, and we're in the large 50 women-owned businesses in the US. We have about 900 employees nationwide. We mentor a fair amount of other meeby-weeby companies, and because of our 97-year legacy, we do have very long relationships with key suppliers in the business. So our next slide, our structure is that we really have 3 divisions. The largest and the oldest division is our electrical distribution business. As I said, it's headquartered in Linden. We have 10 specialty services. We really pride ourselves in our technical services that we offer in every market that covers power engineering, lighting, and energy storage, as well as the IoT. We do a lot of consulting with utilities around the country. We have 14 branch offices, and as I said, we're locally based in Levittown. We have 11 counters, and we have 2 large distribution centers, and then 5 large regional warehouses. So we have a lot of inventory, and we have a lot of longstanding relationships with key suppliers. We also our 2 other divisions in our business handle MRO spend for Fortune 500 companies, as well as the TSI, which is our consulting engineering piece of the business. And they do a lot of work on the Internet of Things with industrial as well as utilities. Our next slide is just a snapshot that shows you our operational footprint. So the blue marks on the U.S. map. We also have operations in Mexico and Canada. Shows the electrical distribution warehouse counters locations, and the light yellow or mustard footprints are our MRO spend, where we're working in warehouses of Fortune 500 companies, actually running the warehouse floor, so providing materials for those companies to run their floors, their manufacturing floors. Some of our key electrical distribution customers are, as many of you, electrical contractors, data communications, utilities, oil and gas. We do a fair amount with government, and those are our appropriate government certifications. We have a large commercial business operation, and then we do a lot of work in infrastructure with transit and all sorts of transportation related projects. Some of the key projects, it's always, you know, when you're trying to describe your business, I always think it's important to talk about some of the key projects that you've worked on. And I'm sure many of you probably worked on some of these projects, and maybe you worked with Turtle and Hughes, or you were unaware that we were even involved in these, especially the local projects in the Philadelphia area. And John Donahue, who is our leader in Pennsylvania, our regional manager there, has been with us for just over 5 years, is happy to answer any specific questions of what we did on these projects. But we provide a range of services. So we would provide lighting, we would provide power distribution, we would provide cable and wire, and we would provide flow goods. And there would be a range across these variety of projects that we would be engaged in. But I'm sure many of you can look down this list and be very familiar with the projects. I don't know, John, did you want to say anything else about some of these projects?
No, just to add that we'll do any kind of job from small to large. As you can see, most of the large jobs are listed here, but we will do any job. One of the, I think, our strong points here in Levittown is project managing and flow goods. So we do a really good job at staying on top of our gear and lighting jobs, and our flow goods next day delivery is one of our strong points here. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And one of the things that I talked about earlier was our focus in technical solutions. And so we have over 97 years built out pretty expansive departments that are known in their marketplaces for the technical services that we provide, such as power distribution, industrial control and automation, lighting, data communications, energy management. We work on energy storage. We do work with transit, where we've done basically a lot of work in all the New York metro systems, and frankly in the LA metro systems. And we're just starting a project up in Boston that's dealing with transit along the signaling line, as well as materials management and logistics. And that's one of those areas that's growing because we do have warehouse space, and we understand the need for project staging as you map out a project in terms of the timing of when things need to be delivered. And so we have the capabilities of doing materials management and logistics, and that's becoming a real expertise within the company. So I know the real reason that we came on the next slide is really talking about some of the distinctive differences of we're a women-owned business. We understand that there is activity around having women-owned or minority-owned businesses on projects. There are incentives as it relates to bidding on work. But there's also this distinctiveness between the DBE, which is really the federal designation. So the federal designation of this is if they're using federal dollars in the project. And the DBE, as many of you know, is it's a disadvantaged business enterprise. And there are limitations on that in terms of the size of the business and the ownership well, the amount of revenue that the company can make and have. And it's funny, in a prior life, I actually used to run a small federal government contracting business. So I'm actually more familiar with these designations than a lot of people probably want to know. But when you're bidding on projects and there's a DBE component, they might say in the subs you can use a MEB or a WEB, but those MEB or WEBs have to fit into the DBE definition. And that's one of the key things that we found in working in other markets. It's helpful to just explain. I mean, again, I view this as lessons learned that we've learned along the way, because we are a women-owned business and really have been for 94 years or 96 years. And then some of the other categories that are measured, like when we apply every year for our renewal, they come in and specifically interview us and ask, is the owner involved in the decision making? Are you providing quotes and project management? Are you maintaining an actual inventory? I mean, they will come and walk through all of our warehouses and ensure that we have the inventory that we're bidding on or providing to projects. We also, they measure if you have a direct account with the manufacturer that you're selling the products, or you're repping the products as a project, as bidding on a project. You really can't use joint checks or cross-corporate guarantees. So these are some of the specifics that we have learned in all of the years that we've been a designated women-owned business, again, sponsored by WeBank. That we get interviewed every year, and there's real clarity around the role that we play. And so the WBE, or the minority or women-owned BE, are really state or private projects, and those designations are in Philadelphia, I understand, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, that 30% of the projects are MBE and 15% are WBE. Now, those are projects that we qualify for, but if it is a DBE or has federal money, we would not qualify for that category. Even if they say you can have a WBE, it has to be a WBE that fits the federal qualifier. And I know sometimes that gets confusing, and sometimes there's a lot of, not clarity around it if you go in and look at the federal language that frankly was written by the Department of Transportation. So that's sort of the descriptive in the federal language that you have to abide by, but it applies to every federal contract that uses DBE as a designation of participation in a project. So we are happy to take questions on that at the end, but I think it's really, as we called it on this slide, understanding the commercial use function and self-assessing yourself, because sometimes you have to go through this checklist and make sure, as a contractor building a team or a project manager, that you're fitting all those quadrants, especially as you're bidding. The next page shows the list of all of our certifications. And this really covers our national certifications, but most importantly, for your areas of interest, we are certified with the City of Philadelphia in an OEO certification, as well as in the state of Delaware. And WeBank is really the national footprint for women-owned businesses. And really in the last 5 to 7 years, they've taken on the responsibility of reviewing every women-owned business and making sure, going down that checklist that I used on the previous page, that you're filling all the categories in terms of ensuring that you are a women-owned business and that the woman who owns the business is engaged in the business. The next page, we talk a little bit about, and I always feel like it's important not to come in and lecture, but just talk about lessons that we've learned along the way. And believe me, we've learned a lot of lessons. And I think most recently, we have established an official, I would say probably now 2 or 3 years ago, a really, what had been an ad hoc practice, an official compliance department in the company. And I think one of the things that I am a big believer in, because I've run a small business, and I'm sure many of you are small businesses as well, is there are key component parts of a compliance department, but it doesn't have to be a ton of people or a ton of time. So even if you're a small business, there are some things in here that we would suggest that you think about incorporating. One, it's important that you establish a hotline so your employees feel like there is a place and a space that if there's any concerns, they can communicate that. And we actually do that with an independent outside company so that it's not somebody in the company getting the phone call. And the outside company gives us a report every month. And frankly, it goes to our audit committee and our board saying if we've had any hotline calls or we have not. A couple of years ago, we got a hotline call that led to a whole investigation in New York City. And frankly, we turned into being a key witness in what turned out to be a very messy contract management issue in New York City for the U.S. District Attorney. So the hotline can work, and it has to be publicized, and it has to be really encouraged if anybody has any issues that they feel like they need to raise. I'd say the other thing is that we use online training. So every year we have so many hours that our employees have to do as part of their employment. That's training. That's sort of part of functional, whether it's discrimination or, you know, some of the ethics, some of the things that tie together the component parts of a compliance program, which is basically tied in with your business ethics and your code of conduct and your core values. And so those three parts at Turtle are all tied together. And we then do training, especially for our new employees, but even on an annual basis, we do training for all of our employees that fit into those categories. So it's a reminder. Now it's run offline, you know, it doesn't have to be a whole training department. And we'd be happy to help give you some suggestions on some of the content of that. We do have a head of our compliance, but she has a full-time job. I don't know if Karen Barcelona is on the phone. She is head of our credit department. And so she knows our customers. She knows the rules of the road. And most importantly, she's highly respected by by all of her fellow colleagues and our employees at Turtle. So when Karen engaged on this in a leadership capacity, it was really about working with our sales team and educating them on the importance of compliance, as well as everybody else in the company. So it's a compliance department. It reports to the board. It reports to the audit committee. And it's, I think in any capacity for any size business, it's important to have the key components of what fits into compliance, which is a place for your employees to report any bad behavior and a place for you to use the platform to talk about ethics and in the business and in the business making of decisions. And so that we have team members across the business, because as you saw in our footprint, we have offices all around the country. So we really use compliance ambassadors, and we try to update them on stories and examples of things that they should think about. And lastly, I would say that one of the things that fits under compliance now is the COVID protocols. Many businesses, because of COVID, are asking, what protocols have you established in your operations? And, we have a whole really maintaining, which I call the three most important things, is wear a mask, 6 feet apart, wash your hands. And so we've established just protocols both in our operations, taking a temperature, making sure everybody who comes in signs in. And as we work through this return to work, we also have some protocols in terms of people coming back into the offices and maintaining a tracking list so we can do contact tracing if somebody does get COVID. And we have seen in several different recent contract bids or bids that we've submitted, they've asked for our COVID protocols. So that might be another area that we put under our compliance jurisdiction, but it's really the simple things of making sure that you're doing the three things that prevent COVID, expansion, but that you're also talking about it with your employees in all your facilities. So that's a really high level sort of review of both Turtle as well as our diversity, COVID, and compliance lessons learned that we would pass along to you and hope you find helpful and insightful. And I wanted to make sure on the last slide here that you have John Donahue's contact and email. If you have any questions after this, if we don't answer your questions or you think about it later and you think, oh, I have a couple questions I'd like to ask, I'm always available, as is Karen Barcelona. And for any of these things that we have, we'd be happy to share information with you or answer any questions in terms of setting up anything that would be helpful to you in your business. So with that, I'm happy to open it up to questions. Sarah, I don't know how you want to do that. You've been great to work with. I have to say, the Electrical Association of Philadelphia has a real star in their executive director, Sarah. So you better protect her or she's going to get stolen away.
Thank you, Kathleen. I appreciate that. And just so everyone knows, after the session today, we're going to go ahead and forward John's contact information to everyone to make sure you have that on hand in case you'd like to follow up with any questions. Of course, we'll be happy to follow or send along the recording as well. But at this point, we're happy to take questions, whether or not you want to unmute yourself, you want to submit the questions via chat. This time is yours, and this is a great opportunity.
Good morning. This is Ellen Barag. I do have a couple questions for Kathleen. Hi there. I've been working in the industry for just about 40 years, and I've worked with Turtle for a long, long period of time. Thank you. When did you guys become WBE, number one? Because I know you are now, but I didn't know exactly, the history of that. And number two, as a WBE, I know that there is a variety of contracts that require diversity content or minority women business participation. When you get those types of opportunities, do you find that you can garner a higher price than a typical competitor without that designation?
I'm going to have John answer the second question, but I would say the women-owned business officially, I think happened sometime in the 70s. I can get you the exact date, but technically the company was started by Mr. Turtle and a Mr. Hughes, both of whom had spouses. Both of the men died, and really one of the wives took over the company way back in the late 1920s. So it has been women-owned and women-led since the 1920s. I think we officially applied for the WeBank status, I want to say, in the 70s. That became a, sort of a certification that had value to the company. But I can get you both of those specific dates. In terms of bidding and margin and pricing, John, do you want to answer that for Ellen?
Yes, sure. Well, I remember when I took the job here 5 years ago, and Jane spoke with me very bluntly about we're not a minority company. We don't lead we are minority certified, but we're not leading that way. We are a regular supply house. We do not garnish more percentage dollars on our projects. That's not how we lead. So she was very, very clear about we're an electrical supply house that has a certification, not the other way around. So yeah, we do not charge more money for being a minority.
All right.
Right. And I thought it was great, Ellen, that you said you know Turtle, but you didn't know that we were women owned.
Yeah, I've known Turtle since the 80s, so obviously you were already women owned then. So it's probably a well-kept secret.
So that proves John's point.
Yep.
We don't change how we go to work, but it is a value if it's an opportunity in terms of bidding on a project for the project owner.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for getting up early. Any other questions?
All right, well, hearing none, I like to give it a little bit because we're not in person. You can't just say something, but with that, I don't see any other questions. Perhaps more will come thereafter. Kathleen, again, thank you so much, especially for getting up so early and joining us from Arizona this morning. We really appreciate your time. It's been a pleasure working with you. John, we'll be in touch as well with a follow-up. And with that, everyone, have a wonderful day. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.